And it's this, I think, idea of you start to dissolve this fear of death. Once you start to dissolve that fear of death, it becomes very natural, but it also gives you a lot of lessons about life. When you can really identify death for what it is, you can really understand a bit more about the meaning of your own life. And the true meaning of your own life is really kind of that it's meaningless. Like, you're going to die anyways. Well, why not make the best of it? Why not be fully invested in what you're doing? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
This is Andy Misle, and it is such a pleasure to have you on the Sanko Leadership Podcast. You are our first outside guest from a reference. I usually ask each on the call somewhere who's a leader in your life that should be on this podcast, and I got your recommendation from Racina House, who is my sister, and she talks very highly of you. So I asked her, what is it about Andy that you think sets him up well to be showcased here? And she told me that your energy, philosophy, and teachings have left a lasting mark on this timeline, and that she met you in the most gangster way possible, a large indoor gathering of strangers in 2020 during that which will not be named.
Okay, I think I remember now.
Yeah.
Some really good gathering at the time, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. So she says you're a phenomenally dedicated musician, martial artist, yogi, filmmaker, husband, and father, and have a magnetism that cultivates community. The quality of individuals that show up when Andy is hosting is impressive, to say the least. He is warm, thoughtful, curious, welcoming, adventurous, and these qualities are both emulated and multiplied by his community. And I also asked Nick, who you know quite well, I asked him to describe in one word how he feels in your presence. And he couldn't stick to one word, so he said, Andy's presence causes me to directly experience power and humility within myself. And I think that's so fantastic, and it's such a pivot and really leans into the, like we were just talking a minute ago, I'm interested in showcasing all types of leaders on here, and I can fall into the habit of falling into a bit of a pigeonhole, and it's done so far. I've had 3 high-level salespeople on so far, and I think that people can get confused that like sales and leadership is the same thing, but it's not. The one doesn't always contain the other, right? And I think it's so cool to have more of an energetic leader and somebody who I can talk to a little bit about fatherhood, husbandhood, and of course we're on a podcast and you're in the film industry, so you probably have a better idea of what's going on behind the scenes than I do at this point. But so grateful to have you on, man, and I just wanted to open it up to you right off the bat here, and any opening remarks and leading into your origin story. Like, how did you get here? How did you get such a stunning reference from these 2 strangers?
Man. Okay, well, thanks so much for the intro. I love Racina, I love Nick. They're both amazing friends. I've gotten to travel with them, I've gotten to know them, and they're always bringing a lot of really, just a lot of fun energy every time they're around. You're talking about sales, you're talking about leadership and sort of the crossovers, and I think a lot of that crossover is just the ability to connect and communicate with people in different ways, right? For me, I think my ability to do so with a broad spectrum of people I have to give credit to being lost for many, many years and sort of trying to find my way and going into different territories with different people, overcoming different things. I think that's really been the biggest gift for being able to relate to a broad, like I said, broad spectrum of people, especially teaching yoga, because you get all kinds of different people come into the room with all kinds of different issues and personalities. And I think what changed over probably the past 15 years is trying to be different people, a different person for different people, and really just honing in on who I am. And I think that's been the biggest impact that that's had on people, because you can get, probably like the same in sales, the same as in teaching, or even filmmaking, is you're trying to be what you think people want you to be, but eventually you end up being nobody when you get lost, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, the more authentic I tried to be, and I think one of the biggest things that propelled that forward was having kids, because they don't care who you are as long as you are what you are to them, right? And for me, I try to show up the best as I can for them. And when you have kids, I think your ability to entertain bullshit kind of just diminishes completely. There's just no time for it or desire for it. So that's been really a gift. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to lead into this. I don't know if you have any specific questions.
Yeah, I mean that's great, and a lot of what I do is teaching almost like natural conversation or conversation techniques, and the plan it's deviated from here, but the initial plan was just to hop on the call with people and just like have a random conversation and see where it went, and that doesn't market very well all the time. It doesn't retain attention all the time, so it's become a little bit more focused, but yeah, although I have a framework here that we can follow as we go, wherever it winds up going is wonderful as well. And I really like what you said about the different people for different rooms. And I have an old mentor who used to talk a lot about that. And he had in university, his wife was a party animal on one side and nice church-going girl on the other side, and he asked her one day what would happen if your church people and your party people wound up walking into the same room. Like, who would you be? and that stopped her in her tracks apparently, and gave her some stuff to reflect on. And I think it's really hard to not do that, to be, I don't know, to be so online, as you said earlier, to be so online about something like that in a world which is so offline largely, and to be reflecting back like those images of what's going on around you, and to have it when 99% is reflecting back one thing and you're trying to be the other 1%. It's hard to overcome that momentum from average day society, and I think that's the key, and that's for me, that's what I found in my spiritual practice. Is I found that kind of core thread that I'm still looking to lock right into, and that has kind of given me a little bit of the answer to the question of like, who actually am I? Like, all I've ever been is masks, and how do I find this truth in myself? And I think I found a little bit of it in there. And it was interesting. I was thinking about like, hey, like what kind of directions can we dive here, and what kind of things can we go? And I really like the spiritual aspect of what I've heard about you. And I know that Yogananda wrote about the body not as a limitation of consciousness, but as one of spirit's most sophisticated instruments. And I guess that's kind of what I'm relating to here is the body. It's the body that's wanting to be all these different people. It's the ego. And the spirit, the core of self, is actually just truth. And I guess I'm curious, maybe if you could speak on that a little bit, and maybe what is your relationship with your body, and how has that changed as you've aged?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, my journey into the mind body practice and spiritual practice started pretty early. It started with martial arts. I studied kung fu growing up my whole life, and then I was, like you said, very involved in music and traveling, and then eventually yoga and meditation. And then I realized, as I got deep into meditation, that there's a core common denominator throughout all those practices. They're all kind of seeking the same thing, which is a sense of absolute presence. Especially with creativity. You can't really be creative if you're planning to be creative. You can prepare for it, but the creative process really only happens like it happens in meditation, when you let go of everything and you just allow the flow of it to propel the work forward. Same thing with martial arts. You prepare for it, and then when you're sparring, all the preparing kind of comes together. You forget everything, and you're just in the motion of it. With meditation, same thing. You're kind of parsing through all your thoughts until you come into this place of infinity, right? And in that emptiness or that fullness, you can find something more profound than all of these masks, as you were saying, because it is really easy to become a proxy to your surroundings or a proxy to your circumstances. For me, the biggest change in my life when it came to letting go of all those things and started to show up as who I am into all those rooms, the church or the party, came through meditation and really starting to create a little bit of distance between what I observed deep in my meditation and the thoughts that were surrounding it, right? And eventually, as you start to carve pathways to that place of stillness, that place of quiet, that place that feels a bit more like home, the deeper the relationship gets to that. And then you start to see all the other relationships for what they are, whether that the relationship is to an addiction, to people, to work, to lifestyle. You start to see it out there as opposed to seeing it like right here. You know, that whole metaphor of looking at a painting from up close and not being able to really see it until you step back from it. It's the same thing with meditation. You're taking a step back from the painting of your life kind of thing, right? And then, you know, that's just the beginning. Because then what do you do with that information? Okay, I have that. It's kind of like, you know, you go do an ayahuasca experience or some sort of spiritual journey. You have this insane experience, but what do you do with it? And that process is the one that takes a little bit longer because it's like digesting a whole bunch of new information, right? It's digesting a whole new way of looking at yourself. And like any sort of digestion, it takes a little bit of time, but the work is almost done automatically. You just have to kind of trust it. So what that's taught me is process is important, whether you're doing a piece of art, whether you're starting a martial art, whatever you're starting a relationship, the process in and of itself is where all the key information comes to how to be in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'm curious, like in that sense, I know this is a common theme in spiritual circles, but that there is no destination, there is no outcome, and I'm curious if the focus is on the process. Like, is the process the goal? Is the process the destination? Is there somewhere that the process is proceeding us to?
Yeah, I think the biggest, I in 2011, I got really, really sick. And I've shared this story before. I had Crohn's disease and I ended up in the hospital. I almost died. I was in there for like 6 months. And that started a really beautiful relationship and a very intimate relationship with the concept of death, you know, because sometimes we forget that we're going to die. But reminding yourself of that, and not only reminding yourself, because it brings up a lot of fear in the West, especially when you have kids. Like, I kind of let go of my fear of death until I had kids, because then you got to like, oh, I got to be around them. But this almost dying and then spending a lot of time in places like Varanasi in India, which is a place where spiritual pilgrimage that people go to die, because they think that when they die there, they go into Purusha or Nirvana, like heaven, if they die in Varanasi. And having said that, when you go there, you can feel there's like a fog, like a fog quality to the air in that place. It feels like death. So it's very intense when you go the first time. I've been there like 7 times. First time I went, I could only be there for like 2 days because it just felt so unnerving. But then you can't stop thinking about the place. And then you start to yearn for that place. And it's this, I think, idea of you start to dissolve this fear of death. Once you start to dissolve that fear of death, it becomes very natural, but it also gives you a lot of lessons about life. You know, when you can really identify death for what it is, you can really understand a bit more about the meaning of your own life. And the true meaning of your own life is really kind of that it's meaningless. Like, you're going to die anyways. Well, why not make the best of it? Why not be fully invested in what you're doing? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. And Yeah, so that's been a real gift for me to let go so much of the outcome and get a little bit more invested in the process because the outcome doesn't really matter. In the end, it's going to be gone anyways. I don't know if that answers a bit of your question, but in the sorry, just one last thing. In the process of mastering anything, what you're actually mastering is yourself. Whether you're mastering an art, whether you're mastering writing, whether you're mastering, it's the ability to focus and the ability to have that thing that you're mastering be a reflection of yourself. It really teaches you about who you are, no matter what it is that you're mastering. I think it's the mastering process.
Definitely witnessed that, like, the more, and it's, I think what you said earlier is going back into giving yourself over to the process and being able to almost step back from your own painting and seeing that, if I only allow myself to learn my primary colors and a few brush strokes and I step back and I'm not that impressed, and I don't feel that great about what I'm doing here with my life. But when I actually devote myself to the process and go all into something and I'm able to step back and see a little bit closer to what might be called a masterpiece, in any skill set or arena in life, that's much more fulfilling on the spiritual side of things. At that core being, identifying like, okay, this is a little bit of who that thread of truth that I seek through my life.
Hmm. Children are really good at that. Are just being completely involved in the process, and their paintings are, yeah, beautiful masterpieces in my opinion. Even though like I've got all my kids' stuff all over the wall here, and yeah, I don't know. I can't express the joy that I can't even express the joy that I feel when I look at their stuff because I'm not just looking at it because I'm proud of what they did, but I just see how invested in their growth. Like their artwork is a mirror of who they are, and that's really fun to watch too.
Do you find that as like I'll say that it must be, if it's true of them, it's true of you, but I'm curious if you can see it in yourself. With the artistic expressions that you have, do you really see that you-ness within it? And is it as obvious, like with all these layers, at a more advanced age than the children, like with all these layers of the ego that kind of sit around that and the masking, is it always as a parent, or does ego get in the way of
I
that?
think it goes away for a long time, especially in your 20s and your 30s. 20s and 30s are a very confusing place for a lot of people. Certainly was for me, where you don't really know what you think you're supposed to have things figured out, and you're trying to figure things out. But once you start kind of letting go of that, I think the process becomes a lot more childlike. I think I'm 47 years old now, and I feel much more childlike than I ever did in my 30s or my 20s. And even though I feel also more mature, but it's this, everything kind of has a full circle. And I find myself now in my 40s doing everything that I wanted to do in my 20s, but from a completely different, I guess, stage in life and perspective, and also recognition, actually getting paid for the work that I do. But the approach itself is very childlike. I'm really trusting that I'm not supposed to know everything. I'm really trusting that I'm never going to be educated enough or even good enough, or whatever the hell that is. When I can let go of all of that, then the work becomes fun and I can get more involved with the work. And that in and of itself, I think, creates the kind of work that people get excited about because it's unique. It's not coming from me trying to do the thing that somebody else is doing, but it really comes from a place of exploration.
Do you think in that sense that all, like, even technical skills are actually creative skills, in the sense of like actually letting go of what you're supposed to know?
100%. I think nowadays, especially when technology has gotten to a place where it will teach you the craft. You pick up a camera, you spend enough time with it, you'll become an artist. At least that's how I've learned. I didn't really go through traditional schooling for anything that I've done. I tried a little bit, with traditional schooling, but it just wasn't for me. I mean, the process is really what taught me. So in the process, a lot of it has to do with technical stuff. I never thought that I'd be a technical person. Now a lot of people come to me for technical advice when it comes to producing or just like in film. But it was just the process, that the technology of itself kind of worked itself into my mind. And that's the power, I think, of a lot of technology that we have right now. It's very, very intelligent.
Yeah. So I guess I'm curious how technology has played a role in, like, you seem to have this arc of maybe spiritual into what I'm imagining is more technical, like filmmaking, and I'm curious, like, what roles technology is playing in your life right now, and what your relationship is to it at a more metaphysical sense, like optimist, pessimist, neutralist, whatever.
Yeah, it's just technology. The body's a technology, and technology is a vehicle towards a vision, potentially, or a intended piece of art or whatever. Like, truly, the body. You mentioned earlier, Yogananda, talking about the body being a tool, and the practice of yoga has been exploring this tool for 20,000 years and developing techniques to maximize the use of the tool, or the antenna. You can almost look at the body as like an antenna for this consciousness. And technology is kind of the same thing. It's kind of the same way. It's constantly improving to, well, who knows? I guess there's a lot of intention as to why technology is being improved for good and bad. But for myself, yeah, it's become a real vehicle. I mean, look at us. We're using technology to create this conversation that potentially will mean something to somebody in the future. So in some ways, this conversation is answering your question, how we're leveraging technology to further a spiritual or a psychological or a leadership idea. But for myself, yeah, I find that technology has become really like a brushstroke, and I get really involved with it and try to find ways to create things in a non-intended way. I'm sure you've experienced this before. You're using a piece of technology. Nobody's ever taught you how to use it, but suddenly you developed a system, right? So the process of using technology in itself can be quite creative by leveraging what you learned in one thing and another thing, combining them, and suddenly you have a piece of work that you didn't even know could be done. But as far as the spiritual practice of technology, I don't think it furthers my spiritual practice. I think, if anything, it can be a massive distraction. So what it does is it makes me look at that, and then I have to kind of separate the two, to be 100% honest. I wouldn't say it furthers me spiritual. I think it can actually, in some ways, especially nowadays with how distracting and addictive the negative information can be, it can kind of pull you that way. But that's life. Right now we're doing that online, but back then you did it with shitty influence from friends. It's like you have to. It's good. It's good to have these spectrums, because it creates contrast, and you can actually see. Oh, okay. As you get older, it's like you can feel when you're getting pulled to a place that you don't want to be, and that's just all it is. It's a wake up call to then go this way. So I think it's a learning experience. I think we're all still learning how to be in this realm of technology. But, the one thing that is constant is that seed in that meditation space, right? That never goes away. So if I ever find myself getting into a place where my mind is starting to behave in a certain way, my actions are starting to be in a certain way, the answer is always the same. Just go sit. Go sit, let everything just, and then come back to your baseline. Yeah, and then also for me, I got super deep into my spiritual practice that looked a certain way, that was very austere, yoga practice every day, meditation, readings, all this and that. And then you have kids, and all that goes out the window. You got to a completely different rhythm. But then that in of itself is another incredible teaching and an incredible yoga practice. So you kind of have to let go of all the forms and find your common, your through line through it all, and observe that. And once you can observe that, that's that authentic piece that I say. You bring that into everything. You don't have to spiritual practice doesn't have to look like this. It can for a bit while you're developing a relationship with your spiritual practice or your deep sense of self. But once you find it, you bring that into everything. And then if you get distracted and if you feel like you're not connecting to it, the pathway has already been laid. You just have to pay attention to it, come back to it, and then keep going. And so the distractions, the getting pulled away from it, in an essence, it's actually also strengthening it. It's strengthening it.
Yeah, I'm identifying. You almost predicated the question I had in my head there was around children and spirituality and practice, and I just noticed myself identifying a lot with a few of your themes, like the theme with kids coming up and having a bit of a dark night of the soul, and this contrast, the darkness to put the light into focus. I find myself speaking on concepts around that quite a bit, and I guess I'll start with something a little simpler and more to the point. Like, what, as you have a 6 and a 2 at home, which is chaotic. So I'm curious how you maintain like your own personal space when they can be so I'll say demanding. Like they don't really understand personal space yet. How do you maintain and keep up whatever the practice looks like on the given day, and what are some parameters that you put in place and boundaries, I guess, for yourself as a father of 2 young kids in order to get what you need to be the best dad that you can be?
Yeah. Well, for one, I have an incredible partner. My wife is incredible, and she understands my need for space sometimes, especially when it comes to work. And then on the flip side of that, sometimes you just can't. And you have to be okay with, my daughter will come in here and I'm in the middle of something and she'll ask me to like do something because she needs help with something. And sometimes I just have to drop everything. Sometimes I can't, but sometimes I just drop everything because it was something that my dad never did, And so I'm very well aware of like the kind of father that I want to be. And I'm also aware of how quickly it goes by. We talk about life and death. Your baby is dying, and then a toddler is being born. Your toddler is dying, and then and that's happening so quick, and you can miss it. I feel so grateful. Like, my daughter was born during the lockdowns, and I spent so much time with her, and that was a real gift. It's a little different with my son because I'm way more busy, and I try to be as present as I can. And sometimes it's just like I can't, and so I rely on my partner to entertain them and to kind of take over in that sense. But I'm also aware of the fact that this time is going by real quick, and I'm willing to at times just drop everything and be with them. I think also the fact that I had my children in my 40s is a lot different than if I'd had them in my 30s, and a hell of a lot different if I had them in my 20s. You talk about the dark night of the soul when your children were born. I never really had that because I already had that experience with something else in my life. By the time they were born, I was ready to be a dad. And it's interesting that you said dark night of the soul, is because I feel like people experience them because children speed up the process of growth. You know what I mean? You are not an adult, and a lot of people are going to hate that I say this, until you have kids. Because you never have to be that responsible for somebody other than yourself until you have kids. And that changes the game. It's a cliche, like many other cliches that they say about fatherhood. They're true. Like, you'll never love anything the way you love your children. You'll never have a reflection of who you are as deep as when you have a child. And you know what I mean? Like, when you have kids and you look at them, it kind of takes you back to when you were a kid, and you start to really observe your life. So it's an incredible. That's why I call it almost like a yoga practice, because that's what yoga is meant to do. That's what meditation is supposed to do. Reflect back at who you are being, but not, or like who you are doing, and to see who the being is in that doing. Did that make sense? Yeah, I think it made sense. Yeah. So children kind of do that for you. They can do that, and for some people, that can be incredibly scary. That's why a lot of people leave, or a lot of people get angry. is because it's a very, very intense experience, and which is why I think a lot of work needs to be done before you have kids. If you are in the position that uh, if your life was chaotic growing up, and if you have certain issues, sometimes it's good to work through a lot of, not all of it, work through a lot of that, so that the experience of having a child is not about you, but it's actually about them. And I was lucky enough to wait long enough that everything is about the children now. Of course, you have to be who you are, and you got to keep pursuing who you are. But they they really destroy your ego in the most powerful and beautiful way.
Yeah. Yeah, you said something there that the children, like you see yourself in the children, and I do too. And what else that I've noticed is I see my dad in myself, and it's been this very weird, like I had a loving but complex relationship with my parents growing up, and being able to, I think I had a lot of thoughts when I was younger in my 20s, and definitely before I had kids, where I was like, man, my parents could have been, I wish that this would have been this way and that would have been that way, and if onlys. And I get into this, and I can like see the thoughts in myself of like the things that I wanted to be different, those automated patterns of ego that are just like triggered sometimes by kids screaming or crying or whatever. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like this is what was going on when I was doing the screaming, and it's this weird like triple mirror, like hall of mirrors situation where I see myself in them, and my parents in myself, and I'm like, where am I? Who am I? Right? Are these just
Yeah.
patterns playing out over and over again, or how much control and how much differentiation can I have? And maybe I'll hand that over to you. Is like where does that seat of control lie, or is there a seat of control, or are we just really reenacting patterns on a little bit better or a little bit worse?
Yeah, I certainly get what you're saying about looking at your children, thinking of yourself, and thinking of your parents. I went through the exact same thing. My father was orphaned when he was really young. I grew up in Chile. He became really famous at a very young age. He was an entertainer, a singer, and he was famous his whole life until he died. He became like this national icon in Chile. My mother's parents died when she was very, very young as well. So there was a lot of trauma in their personal lives, and they, in some ways, never emotionally grew up. And that was kind of traumatic for the children growing up because they didn't know how to deal with children. And it wasn't, yeah, like, and I kind of knew all that, but I never really had a lot of compassion, true compassion and empathy for it until I became a parent. And you see your kids and you realize my parents were like this. They were babies, and they were not nurtured in the way that they probably should have been. And so I guess, what am I trying to say here? I grew up in such a way that developed a lot of trauma in my life, and I know that word gets thrown around quite a bit, but it did. I had suffered through like a lot of mental addictions and some substance addiction. But I, through my practice and through the things that I overcame through my practice and journeys and all that sort of stuff, I visibly, and I say visibly because I felt like that, broke a lot of chains, a lot of passed down patterns, especially on my father's side. Um, and so I kind of emancipated from that pattern. And I'm able to be the kind of parent that my parents were not able to be with me. And so all the trauma and all their trauma and all their inability to deal with me has been the biggest gift for my children, because it's that contrast that I was talking about earlier, is that I see where things can go, but I also understand how you can steer the ship in the direction that you want to. A lot of that has to do with transparency and really recognizing that you're not raising children, you're raising adults. And it starts going through childhood. So everything that I teach my kids, the way that I interact with them is for the teenager that they're going to be and for the adult that they're going to be. And that's not by saying, oh, you got to do well, I guess sometimes it is about trying to, you got to do things this way, but it's more about encouraging them. And I think I learned a lot of this from teaching yoga as well, is encouraging them to come up with their own questions, which in turn is the same as having them come up with their own answers. I've always thought that if you're able to have a question, it's because you actually already have an answer. It's like 1 + 1 = 2. So 1 + 1 = 2, meaning they're the exact same thing. So if you have 1 + 1, you already have 2. You just have to get rid of the distraction or what's not letting you see the answer. But you already have the answer. So yeah, so if you can get them to come up with the questions, you inherently are getting them to come up with the answer. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, and it's bringing up for me. I forget where I read this. The idea that since you can neither create nor destroy energy in the universe, is that all answers and all questions already exist, and even the most advanced magical seeming science of 10,000 years from now, it's already out there. So then the question is, why don't we have it already? And it kind of suggests like everything is outside of the self or outside of this instrument or this body, and we're using this body more as Bruce Lipton would say, more as an antenna to receive a signal from the field. And so when we are meditating and getting away from like the gross material form, we're actually accessing that field more readily, because we're turning into I guess an infinite signal that can expand out to the far reaches of existence, and we can actually catch downloads that way. And I'm curious if that's what the process is. It
is exactly that. That's exactly. The practice of yoga is clearing all the channels. You can think of your spine as a antenna, like you said, with the chakra system, however you want to look at that. And then from the spine, you have all these other antennas, the nadis, even the nervous system extending throughout the whole body. All of that gets affected by every single moment of your life. Every single heartbeat is imprinting a moment in the whole system. And intense moments get stored intensely in your body. This is trauma, right? Which doesn't diminish your existence. It doesn't diminish the power of your antenna. It just clogs it up. But the essence of who you are is unchanging. What you are experiencing is everything that's on top of that. Identity, patterns, all this stuff. The practice of yoga is stripping that away. Meditation is stripping that away. Not necessarily, I would say, even getting rid of them, but actually developing a pathway to that deep sense of spirit, that deep sense of self. So it's a symbiotic relationship. The more you get in touch with that, the more all the other things start to sort of dissolve and not have the grip that it usually has on your mind. So the process of practicing meditation and practicing all the yoga practices is to both clean the slate, but also heighten and turn up the voltage of that essence of who you are, so that it becomes tangible, observable, and then it starts to re-identify you or de-identify you. Let go of all your identities. And in letting go of your identities, that which is starts to come up to the surface. It's actually quite simple, but incredibly hard at the same time, because people love their drama. People love their identities. And I don't know if it's because they love it or it's because it's so familiar, and familiarity sometimes guises itself as comfort, and people don't want to step outside of it because it's very, very scary to step outside of that boundary that you know so well. Even if outside of it is the rest of your life. Outside of it is all the answers that you're looking for. So people can get really stuck in that comfort zone, which is why, and I even think maybe this is why it's becoming so popular now, this idea of getting yourself outside of your comfort zone through cold dipping, through whatever, because it's about breaking down the barrier of what you think you are able to do, and the more you do that, you start to realize, oh, there's this shit is kind of limitless. I can keep pushing the boundaries, and it's less about a goal necessarily and more about just pressing outside of those boundaries that you've created for yourself.
I'm really curious, Andy. Like, we're talking about the comfort zone. That's well within my field of teaching and experience in life, and I've been exploring this concept of like Dharma recently, and I'm curious your perspective on how to differentiate between, like, I'm living my Dharma, or I'm in this comfort zone that this comfort zone-esque because it's what I was designed to do, versus actually I'm just living in like a toxic feeling of familiarity that I am lying to myself and feel like I'm good at, and therefore I'm not stepping out into the next thing. Does that make sense, that question?
Yeah, I think, well, I think maturity helps with that, but I think that you just know. There's a knowing. You know when you're in your knowing that everything seems symbiotic and you would be doing this no matter what. And you can't be without it. That's a good question, though, because you can be in the thinking of you can be in the thinking that, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, but I think it goes more down to this piece that I was saying earlier, that there's a common thread through all my spiritual practices that kept pulling me back. Like, I've got a brother who I haven't seen in years. He became like hard drugs, heroin, like all that, and I have a sister who's who's almost like a second mother to me, and we all have the same parents. So what made us go on these different paths? I could have very easily gone down a path like my brother, but there was this piece, this thing that kept pulling me into making choices to be better. Even though I fucked up so many times, there was always this like underlying sensation that, man, I just need to be doing this. I don't know why I need to be doing this. And it brought me into martial arts. It brought me into yoga. And it brought me, I think, now to a place where I feel like I know who I am. And I think that knowing of who you are is what you would call Dharma. So it's not about necessarily a particular thing that you should be doing in life. That can be a symptom of knowing who you are. But the knowing who you are piece is the Dharma. What you do with it, I don't wouldn't say is part of your Dharma, right? If you find out who you are and your path is to be a parent, or your path is to be leading people, that needs to come out from a deep knowing rather than a deep desire. Does that make
I I think that that does make sense, like on an intellectual level, and I think for myself, like for myself, one of my big overcomings and something that I'm working with is my own history in very hard drugs and black markets, working in terrible, awful places, and coming into a mental space where I essentially paranoid schizophrenic for many years, eventually recovered from that, and now I have this wholesome life, and I have for a long time. But there's this thing inside of me that still says, hey, you can't trust things that you think, or you can't trust things from inside of you, because half the time they're delusions. And I think I'm still quite caught in that, about like what basically when truth comes up from within me, is like, is this truth, or I still have suspicions it's, for lack of a more coherent term, a demon, right?
Yeah, I mean, those are the patterns that we're talking about. Those are the sticky things, right? But you actually know. You know when that voice comes up. You know. Do you not?
I I think I do know, and I'm still like, I still fall into this cycle of telling myself, oh, I couldn't know. I shouldn't know, maybe. I shouldn't
Yeah.
know, I should be more skeptical.
Yeah, I, for one, I've always held this deep belief that going into deep drug addiction is just the wrong approach to a spiritual path. But actually, it's the same desire. You go into a spiritual path because you inherently know that there's something more to this experience. There's something
Yes.
you don't want to be where you're at. There's got to be something else. And so people do all kinds of spiritual practices. And at the beginning, drugs is kind of like that. You take drugs and you're like in this place of like, oh my God, I am beyond my senses. I am beyond the skin and bones. You do the same thing with a yoga practice or the meditation. One is actually taking you closer to God. The other one is potentially showing, oh, there is a God, but it's actually also showing you that there's and it's not taking you forward. It's just giving you, it lies. You know, like I've said this about marijuana. It lied to me. It promised me creativity. It promised me this and that. But eventually it actually just dulled all my senses. And I was unable to like, you know, it gives you something for a bit, but then it kind of takes it away. There is a spiritual practice will just constantly keep giving you. And it will give you, not just by giving you the bliss and giving you it will give you the challenge. But in that challenge, there's also the opportunity to grow even further and further. And the more you're able to trust yourself, trust that that voice is going to come up, but also trust that you now know, even if you think you don't know, just trust that voice will quiet down. And the more times that voice quiets down, quieter that voice becomes. It just starts to become like this like nagging thing, and that you might have to live with for the rest of your life. But that, so what? That's just the price you have to pay for all the stupid shit you did. Right? No problem. You know, life is much more than that little voice. You start to see that. You start to see that what you are is the master. You're the master. You are the master, and you have to look at it that way. So the voice is not your master. The thing, that doubt, is not the master anymore. It's just a doubt. It's just a weather pattern coming in and going out, coming in and going out. But it's always shining. The sun is always there, even if the clouds come and go. So that's how I treat a lot, because I get that, man. I would say that it still comes up for me. There's still doubt that comes in all the time because I'm still a slave at times to circumstance. Circumstance is good. Oh, life is great. Circumstance is bad. But what has changed for me is that when there's a shitty circumstance that presents itself, it used to destroy me for weeks, maybe months. Now, a couple hours. It'll really affect me, but then I'm able to transmute that. I'm like, okay, here's the one thing that I've learned about my life is every time something shitty happens or a disappointment happens, it's every single time it's opening up a door. And I can either choose the door that's opening or I can choose the door that's closing. My whole life, I always chose the door was closing. I chose to like observe the door that was closing. I couldn't even see that there was another door. Now I'm looking for the other door every single time. That's something that is actually, I guess, is shifted now that I'm thinking about it, is that I'm actually looking at every single closing door as an opportunity. And
Do you think?
that's like there's nothing metaphorical about that. That's very literal.
Yeah, I like that, and I love the piece about drugs and addiction as a spiritual path, and I think I would, in that sense, and in my own life, I would call everything as a spiritual path. You know, I don't I don't believe there is anything but spirit, and I don't know how all this comes to be. This gross material form. I've read a lot of the theories of how it comes to be from a spiritual thing, but I think it's all a beautiful illusion.
Well, the addiction piece is like I said. I feel like it's a pull to be outside of yourself, but you're
Mhm.
using a substance outside of yourself to do it. And I think that what people call addiction is just deep grooves, like
Mm.
deep carved grooves. Like when you're driving in the snow and you create grooves, but then you try to like turn out of it, it can't. It'll just want to follow the grooves that are on the road. We create grooves. Well, the best way to let go of a habit is by replacing. We're habitual creatures. The thing about drugs is that it creates deep, deep grooves that is hard to come out of. And so sometimes it just means consistency on carving out a different groove.
Yeah, and I'm touching back a little bit to your comment about like the energetic grooves. You didn't say this, but I was getting like an Akashic vibe, Akashic record of the personal log of the Akashic, and how our experiences basically code that frequency into our identity, and emotional experiences code it even deeper. And I guess that's what I'm coming back to here, is that drugs produce a very emotional experience, and it codes that frequency deep into our internal log.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just the source is way different. The source in and of itself. Um, drugs are changing the chemistry of the body to behave in a certain way,
Hmm.
but so are most practices that you do. When you're around your children, it's like a drug. Your whole chemistry changes. When you practice yoga, it's working literally on the chemistry of your body like a drug. But it's all coming from yourself and like truly from your own spirit. Your spirit is actually activating your deep sense of being is activating these drugs to behave in a certain way, which you develop love and you develop this knowing and all this sort of stuff. So the issue, I think the issue with drugs in many ways is because it's an outside force working on you, so it's foreign, and there's always a price to pay with those kinds of things. It gives you something, but it takes something at the same time. Whereas other things, other practices just give you, and it's a very symbiotic and relationship that you can have with loving your children or developing that deep sense of self.
Mm.
It's giving you the thing that you're actually looking for. It's just giving it to you in doses that are so small that you can't sometimes perceive it as much as like the overwhelming sensations that you get with the drugs that numb you, right? This
Yeah.
feeds you. The other one kind of numbs you over time. It might not in the moment because it's going to take all your senses and heighten the shit out of them. But the rebound effect is dullness. So
Mm.
what does that mean? Then you got to go deeper into those things so that you can get that. Well, you know all about this, but there are things like like I went to the Amazon before doing ayahuasca was like super trendy, and I did the whole experience of ayahuasca, and I thought it was an incredible experience. And a lot of people asked me, was it life changing for me? And I truly don't think it was. I think meditation has been much more life changing to me than doing those kinds of journeys because it will take you right out there, but it will bring you right back. And it takes a long time even to digest that information. So it like introduces you to God, but then it brings you right back. Meditation and yogic practices are like small steps. If doing an ayahuasca experience shoots you to the moon all the way up here, and then it brings you right back, meditation kind of goes here and then here, here and then here, here and then here. It's actually giving you steps. They're much smaller, but then over time you actually get to the top floor and get to where you're going with it. It doesn't dull you. It doesn't. The rebound effect is not the same as it would be if you were doing it with drugs.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. That's been my experience as well. I haven't tried ayahuasca at this point, but I have some experiences with dimethyltryptamine, and that was quite. Yeah, it was a little bit softer of a comeback. I had that in the Dark Night of the Soul, and it was interesting how it was what I needed. It resolved what I needed to know about what happens on the other side of the veil of death, or like the bit about the nature of reality. And then my body like reapparated, and I came back in, and then it was from a addict standpoint, it was a super cool experience. So I wanted to have it again, and I literally, I can't bring myself to take it again, right? I have it, and I can't bring myself to take it. And it's something about, I would say, God saying like, you needed this for a purpose, and I gave you exactly what you needed, and now you don't need that anymore, so set that away.
Yeah, I think it gives you an introduction to what is possible, but it's not going to give you what is possible. That you have to get through a different means. It can show you, okay, this is here, but it's not going to give it to you. It's like, go back, do the work that you need to do in order to access this like space. And it's 100% doable. And then when you access that space over and over again in a natural way, that space starts to be embodied. Not psychologically, like truly the whole being becomes more spacious or more conscious or more activated. Whereas when you do it with drugs, it's much more psychological, and it starts to make this desire piece come back. Like how do I explain that? Like this desire, that voice that you're talking about. Let's take it again. Let's go there. Let's go there. Let's go there quick. Right? It doesn't want to do the work. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, that's old school, like almost mammalian brain components that are. I read, and I was surprised actually that, or I didn't read. I have a mentor who I was asking about the monkey mind, and she had said that the mind is actually one of the oldest constructs in us as like form. And it's super, super ancient, and it has all these like deep-seated things that have been working for millions and millions of years, and that's kind of the presence that we're often fighting against, and we misidentify as it because it's so good at its job. But when we can get out and actually step away from the power of the mind or the monkey chatter that goes on, and realize true self as presence and as being, but then it's still, you're not going to dismantle the mind.
Yeah,
it's still going to be there.
The price to pay for being human is the fact that you get this illusion around what you are that has been constructed, like you said, for millions of years. Like this body that you have, that I have, is nothing more than memory, genetic memory. This is all genetic memory that's been passed down. So I have to contend with that. As a spiritual vessel that comes into that memory, I have to parse through it like a lotus, making itself through muck to eventually bloom into the sun. This is it. This is the process of a human being, is to come in and I think, become enlightened, for lack of a better word. I think the purpose is to come here and go through the process of enlightenment. And I think that we all go through processes of enlightenment. Maybe not like the bodhisattva enlightenment, but you're definitely much more enlightened than you were. You're asking questions that are enlightened, right? The ability to actually, again, have these questions is because we actually deep down inside have these answers, and we're just working through the doubt, which is this body and this mind. We are both finite and infinite, but we know very little about either one of these, right? You're living a finite existence, this body, this mind, and you have an infinite existence, which is your soul, and you're trying to find your way somewhere in the middle between both of these, and you don't know what is what. And the practice of yoga, and I keep bringing the practice of yoga because it's what I know, what I've practiced, gives you an understanding of both those things. This finite piece, this body, it gives you a deep understanding of it, but it also gives you a deep connection to that piece of you that is infinite, living in this finite. That's the beauty of it. It gives you a way to read both. That's the book of my teacher used to always say, you got 3 books you got to learn how to read, and once you learn how to read those, you'll have all the answers that you need. It's the body, the breath, and the mind. If you can like really learn how to read this, what you're learning is existence, because it's all within you. You know, the intelligence that is making you breathe and that is making your heart beat is the same intelligence that is telling this tree to grow and that flower to bloom. It's actually the same intelligence. Your thoughts and your cognitive sense is not making you do that. It's the natural intelligence of the universe that is actually creating this synchronicity within you. So learning how that happens through closing your eyes, going deep inside, and it's not like it's not a cognitive thing. It's not written down. It's learning how to read it in a different way, learning how to understand it in a different way, and a lot of that is that trust piece that you can get there, that allows for you to keep going there and surrendering to that process. And then before you know it, you have a deep sense of knowing who you are. And then if somebody asks you, well, who are you? This is it. What else do you want me to? This is it. Can you see it? This is who I am. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess maybe just to circle back for any viewers who might not be as familiar as you and I. Like, I had a misconception for a long time, and we keep coming back to the yoga piece and the spiritual practice, and I when you say yoga, I understand many different aspects of that, but essentially, as I believe it defines as the pursuit of God. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm curious if you could give kind of a primer for those who are still looking at yoga as putting on some spandex and going and stretching in the gym.
Yeah, I think if you're going to use the word God, it's the realization that it's within you. You know, it's the embodiment of the divine within you. Is if you're going to use the word God, you don't have to use the word God. I choose to, because I that's within my vernacular. But it's the realization that the spirit that was walking with Jesus is the same spirit that is walking with you. You just have to let go of all the other stuff that isn't that. And that's what the process of yoga is letting go of everything that, it's not about finding who you are. It's about letting go of everything that you are not. And then what you're left with is that, right? When you let go of all your desires, when you let go of all your doubt, when you let go of all your pain, when you let go of all your fear, your assumptions about the world, what's there left? If it's despair, it's not that. If it's a deep sense of not happiness, but deep contentment, that's closer. It's not the pursuit of happiness. It's not the pursuit of anything. It's the unveiling of what's there. That's what yoga is. And so the asana practices, the postures, is really just working on the chemistry of your body. You know, all these postures and with the yogis with their feet behind their head and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, they look fancy, but actually there is a purpose, because every single posture that you do creates a frequency within you. When you do a deep back bend, it creates a very, very specific feeling. When you do a forward fold, it's a completely different experience. The mastery is using all of these different frequencies to unlock the lock. You know, like, have you ever done a yoga practice? Yoga class. A good yoga class, when you go into shavasana and you lay down, you disappear. The body's gone, the mind is gone, and you're in this incredible space where you're like, you know, and that's kind of the step one. But that process of getting there has been unlocking. It's been like, you know, when you have a lock and you have different numbers, it's the same thing. Every posture is like a different number. It's got a different frequency. And then when you combine all that work and you intensify the work, you bring it to like this incredible heightened state, and then you let it go. It's the letting go that you are working yourself towards in a yoga practice. And I'm talking about the physical practice. It's not about the postures. It's about actually what comes up when you let go of all the postures. And it's called Shavasana, which is like Shiva's pose or like the corpse pose, right? So what is that saying? It's the practice of death. Yoga is the practice of dying. It's the practice of really dying in this moment, so that the next moment you can be reborn. And you're doing that again and again and again and again, because you're creating a different groove. The groove that you're creating, or maybe less about the groove that you're creating, it's about letting go of the grooves. You're letting go of the samskara. Samskara is like a groove. It's like these patterns that karma starts to create within you. Samskaras is about letting go of the karmas, letting go of the samskaras, so that the bodhisattva can emerge from within you. And that's what the practice of yoga is the dying of the past and the reborn, the opportunity of rebirth. Literally, with every single breath that you have is an opportunity for rebirth. The inability to see that is because we also have our past that is pushing behind us. I've always kind of like looked at it that way. It's like yoga is kind of like shock therapy, so that you can actually interrupt the momentum of your whole life. Your whole life, all your patterns are pushing you in a certain way, and you need some sort of shock therapy to stop that momentum, so you can have a moment to breathe and reassess where the hell you are. And so yoga practice can do that. It certainly did it for me. I was going down a route. I was able to land onto a practice that was able to like break my momentum. But it took about 10 years. That's the other piece. Depending on how intensely your patterns are pushing you is how much medicine you need to take. Medicine here, I'm saying like a practice of a spiritual practice. But, there are dangers too to it all. You have to make sure that to be discerning, because there are teachers out there can lead you the wrong way. So at the end of the day, it's up to you. It's up to you to find it, to be the discerning eye. There is poison within the medicine too. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think like a teacher is almost like a parent, and at some point in your life, you have to emancipate. Otherwise, the teacher or the parent didn't do a good job.
Yeah, so true. I think, that can so often be maybe forced on us, or I definitely forced it on my parents. I needed that emancipation earlier than they probably thought I was ready, and I just went out and took it, and that's how I wound up in all the crap I wound up in. Out there trying to prove myself, trying to find out how to prove that I was independent, how to prove that I was a man, how to prove that I could take care of my family, and just it led to very dark places before it led out, but it all led here, so it's all good.
That's part of Dharma, though, man. That's how sometimes you land onto your path. Sometimes, if things are going your way most of your life, you don't even realize that there's a path because you've never been pushed to it. Sometimes you have to go into that dark place in order to see the light. The best way to look at a candle is not in daylight. A candle doesn't do anything for you in the daylight, right? It only does something for you in the dark. So you can't even identify the light within the light. You can only sometimes identify it in the dark, that light can be a guiding through the dark until you find the light again.
Awesome. Well, Andy, I am just mindful of the time here. I know you got about another 20 minutes with us, and I don't want to ram you right against the back wall, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I have like 5 kind of closing questions left here. They could probably easily go over, so we'll get through whatever we can. The kind of on this theme of a lot of these things we've been talking about, but also along a theme that I often like to cover in these podcasts is, of course, the machine intelligence revolution, and just the different impacts of that and different perspectives on that. I'm very optimistic about everything that's going on, even synthetic consciousness or synthetic intelligence or whatever. And a lot of people are fairly doomsday. And the way that I see it, and I'm curious like to what extent you agree with my logic, and if you want to expand on your thought process there. I see it that if man is made in God's image and machine is made in man's image, then machine is made in God's image, and as almost a piece of natural evolution. And I don't think that takes man out of the equation, but I think that's why I'm so pleased with it, is because God's creation made this creation.
Yeah, I see in a similar way. I I look at it as our intelligence, like your intelligence, you speaking to me, as artificial as well. You know, like this existence in this body, you know you are not your body. So this whole thing is artificial in many ways. It's a piece of technology that intelligence is communicating through. Synthetic or like AI is kind of no different. You know, even as we know it to be right now, it's not really creating anything. It's just editing everything at an incredibly high pace, right? I think it's no different than the human body. I mean, I always have this thought of like, this is kind of where I guess it gets into most like the movie The Matrix thought of like intelligence is intelligence, and it's going to find its way to express itself. It found itself through evolution in this body, but this is actually like pretty finite. It doesn't retain a lot of memory. What if intelligence now is trying to find a different vessel and kind of using us to make that happen? I mean, that's pretty sci-fi-ish kind of view. But yeah, I don't know. I think that it is a tool. I have a lot of hope for it, and I think right now, the internet, for example, I looked at it as a meditation. You know, like of the collective mind. When you sit down to meditate for the first time and you close your eyes, you just realize how insane your thoughts are. You can't even sit still. You're like, oh my God, like I can't even like close my eyes. Everything is coming at me. The whole mind in itself is starting to communicate and observe itself. And it feels chaotic. The internet is kind of that at this place. We're actually getting a deep insight into the human mind, and we're starting to realize how fucking nuts it is. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. And hopefully, at some point, it's going to start to actually work itself in a more symbiotic way. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe this is me being hopeful. But I look at the internet as a meditation, it's very much living in relationship to our limbic system. It's a response to the human consciousness. So it's actually very revealing of our patterns or our archetypes of, you know, even an algorithm. What is an algorithm? It's just a mirror to your desires. It's a mirror to your patterns. So it's actually very, very telling of the human experience, but we are still not even we're not even toddlers yet in it. You know, we're actually still behaving like 2-year-olds when it comes to the internet experience and to the AI experience. But I think that, you know, hopefully it will become a tool of enlightenment, not a tool for doomsday. But I believe that human connection is something that cannot be replaced. This is why, you know, even within the arts, people are getting freaked out that AI is going to take over music and art. And I'm like, if you're thinking that way, then you have no idea what art is or what music is. It's a divine composition making its way through this vessel to express itself into the world. You know, you have all this like wicked music coming that people are doing, like Eminem and jazz. Great, yeah, I listened to it once. I thought it was cool. I'll never listen to it again because I don't. It's pain. I don't feel its experience. I don't feel its enlightenment. I feel a button that somebody pressed. You know, I feel like even with like movies, I think a lot of movies have gone to shit because of Marvel, because people are sick and tired of sci-fi or of CGI. People can't connect to that. Just like I'm a filmmaker, and I want to make movies that are much more inspired by the way that they were done in the 70s and 80s, because I think people are going to crave that. People are craving an analog experience. I don't think that's ever going to go away. You know, even our children. Like I think that potentially even our generation is more affected by AI and the internet than the kids are growing up, because we um, maybe create stories about things changing too much because they're so different then. But I think that, even the archetypes in ancient history are the same archetypes that are being played now in stories and in movies. The same things that drove people hundreds and thousands of years back then are driving us now. So there's something about the human experience that's never going to leave. And I think if it does, yeah, I just don't see it going that route. I think if anything, we are being sold that more than the reality that it actually is, because that fear in and of itself is a really, really profitable fear, like most fears for certain people, right? Um, yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question again.
Yeah, you actually you answered my question, and you answered about two other questions I usually ask, but decided to hop over for in lieu of time. So yeah, that was an incredible answer, and I identify a lot with your experience. You communicated around film, and that's, I think that's my thesis a lot around this podcast, and the business model I'm working with currently is I don't care that you can make Theo Vaughn talking to Joe Rogan both as babies having a podcast using AI and put anything you want in it. I think that we're going to go through a lens where it's going to go hardcore into the AI, but I'm intending to set up, and I believe that people will come back to the desire for a human experience, for something raw, something real, something that just has a bunch of mistakes in it, just like raw footage, right? So that they know they're not being played or manipulated by something that they have been for years, and that may take 5 years to play out. I don't know, but I'm definitely along for the ride on that one.
I think people are more aware of it than before, and every year people become more aware of it, more aware of it, more aware of it. Eventually you realize that sugar's not good for you, and that baby should just eat more.
Yeah, awesome, man. Well, here's one thing that I always want to ask and sometimes forget, but who's a leader in your life that you believe could add value to a podcast like this? And who are they, and why do they stand out to you? And would you be willing to introduce them?
Oh my, there's a lot of folks. I mean, one person that kind of pops into my head is a teacher that I know named Guru Singh. I mean, when we're talking about his teachings are like, I think I heard it inspired even the movie The Matrix. And he comes from a lineage that has a lot of controversy because he comes from Yogi Bhajan and the Kundalini realm, and they have like a lot of a big what do you call it, like a scandal come out years ago. But I had the opportunity to spend time with them, and I mean, talk about expanding your mind into thinking outside of your paradigm. And he puts spirituality, science, technology, and like just life in a way that I've never heard anybody put it before. The Guru Singh would be one person that I would say is an incredible thought leader in my life, even though I haven't seen him in probably like 4 or 5 years.
Okay, is he local or like around our part of the world? Or
Guru Singh is in Seattle, or
okay,
I think he's in Seattle. But you can look him up and see if you could. Yeah, he's an older gentleman. And then there's also my friend Tiaga Prem, or Reno. He lives in Vancouver.
Okay.
He's somebody you could take a look at. He also an incredible teacher with a very, very deep knowledge. Like he's read a lot, and he's one of the, like, we're a little different. I'm not the my knowledge doesn't come from what I've read. It comes from what I've experienced, and him as well. And he had a lot. He had a past of like alcohol and drug abuse as well, so it actually informs a lot of his teaching. So he might be a really good actually person that you might want to connect with, because I think you'll relate to his teachings quite a bit.
Okay.
But he's also read so much, and he's got one of those minds that can just recall teachings from all over the place. But he's also synthesized it through his dark night of the soul as well. And I can put you in touch with him.
Awesome.
He's one of my best friends. Yeah.
That would be incredible. Thank you very much, Andy. And and I'm happy to reach out as well and just say all the nice things that you just said about them, and it usually works out pretty well for me.
Yeah. No, Reno and I, we did a trip to India, and that's neither here nor there. But he's gone through a lot of different growth pieces in his life, different practices of yoga, different identities. And I think that's been the process of gathering all that wealth of knowledge and to kind of be the person that he is today, which is in many ways what we said before. He's let go of a lot of it, and it's revealing who he is right now.
Wow.
Definitely a super interesting guy to talk to.
Okay. Well, I look forward to it.
He's a very generous teacher as well. Yeah.
And other than that, brother, it looks like you have something else coming up in 10 minutes, and
I take my daughter to jiu-jitsu.
To jiu-jitsu, okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I want to make sure that you have some breathing space between this and that, and I appreciate.
30 was giving me the breathing space, so we're good.
Okay. Yeah. In that case, is there anything like either we haven't covered or that you feel you wanted to share about or talk about, or we kind of glanced over during the course of the conversation here?
I mean, these conversations can go forever, so I'm not sure unless there's anything that any question that you have, or any comment that you have, or anything that you want.
We'll see if we can get through this here. I've something I've noticed is Eastern and Western civilizational theories, like the yugas. And are you familiar with fourth turning thesis?
Yep.
Okay.
Fourth turning thesis? No, I'm very familiar with the yugas, though.
Okay, yeah. Fourth turning is...
The yuga conversation goes very much in line with my internet conversation. The yugas, when they talk of Sattva Yuga, it's a unification of consciousness, right? Where the conscious field of the world becomes more unified, and Kali Yuga is when the conscious field becomes much more fragmented. In the fragmented place, the only yoga practice that survives is Bhakti Yoga, which is the yoga of devotion, which is also the seed point of religious belief. Because belief is the assumption that something exists outside of your experience. And that's what Kali Yuga is just the belief that there's something, but not really the connection. But as we get closer to Sattva Yuga, and the way it's explained is that it's more of a planetary alignment, because our solar system is closer to its sun, and so the conscious and the ether field becomes much more dense in the world. And as we get to Sattva Yuga, the conscious field becomes much more unified, to the point where telepathy, mind reading, deep connection is something that starts to emerge. And I've always thought of like the internet being that. The internet is telepathy, man. It looks like a conscious field, and we're using it right now. But I can like type out a word, and it will be broadcasted to the world. If that's not magic, I don't know what the fuck is. That is something that came out of that. So in many ways, you can look at it as like, oh, it's just technology. Yeah, but it is what you said. It's like we created that. So it is a form of telepathy. And literally, the conscious field through internet is uniting in the world. Now, it's creating a lot of chaos, but that's just because we're still at the beginning phases of this. But I do believe that, the earth, the conscious field is becoming much more unified, but in that we're also getting to see both heaven and hell.
And do you what's our role in that as individual conscious beings?
Cogs in the wheel, I think. And you still need the cogs for the wheel to turn.
Yeah.
Right? Our role, I think, is to be those antennas and to unify the piece. And yeah, it's interesting. I don't know what the role is. I don't know what the role of the human being is. I think it's just consciousness working itself out. I think potentially it's consciousness learning about itself, and we're part of that. We're part of that. That. We're part of that. I guess. I don't really know the answer to that. What is our role in that, other than to be in the role that we are.
Be in the role that we are and die well, I might say.
Yeah, and then go back into the pool. You know, you come from nothing. You're here, and then you're going back to nothing. It's interesting. We look at it. If the universe, let's say, if God and the universe is infinite, right? If that's the definition of it, then you cannot be a part of it, because you can't parse out the infinite. The infinite is in everything. So you are that. You are that infinity, right? You have been that infinity before you were born, and you're going to be a part of it after you're born. And so the time that you've been here is not even a fart in the wind when it comes to what you are. And yet we're just identified with that little piece, which is this body, this mind, this moment. But actually, that which is before you and that which is after you is much more of who you are than this piece right now. This is just a moment. We came into it and we're leaving it.
So in this, the infinity before and after, I'm curious your beliefs or even your experiences on, there's some systems which would say like Nirvana-esque, or the Buddhist types of systems, and there's some that indicate that it's more of a conscious experience in a different form. Like there is some type of experience on the other side, like when interacting with infinity. What has been your experience with noodling those kinds of abstract metaphysical questions?
Honestly, the experience that I've had with it is just deep states of meditation. That's the closest that I can say that I've had, where I feel infinity physically. Like I can relax my body to a point where I can't tell where my body begins or where it ends. And then you just keep going down, then eventually you're in this space where if you ask me what was it like, I could not tell you, because I was just not engaged with it in that way. You know, when you go into a deep state of meditation, time just kind of goes by. You have this experience. It's like coming out of like a dream. You try to explain it to somebody and words don't come out, right? It's like when you go into like deep states of meditation, you have this incredible experience, but you have zero idea of how to explain it because it's inexplicable, you know? And I feel like maybe death is like that. It's not something that you can explain through words. It's not the information in there. It's not quantifiable in that same way. But this idea of samsara and of life and death is something that I really do entertain as well. You know, I entertain the fact that, you know, the soul has a birth and a death, and the life of the soul is many physical lives that work out what it needs to work out. So everybody's been a drug addict, everybody's been in the dumps, everybody's been enlightened, everybody has to go through a life. The soul goes through a life. And so this piece right now that we're playing out is working that out. Karmas is working that out.
Like a cell in a larger metaphysical being, just again playing a micro role. But do you think our biological cells are experiencing something similar?
Oh yeah, we're like a universe. I mean, and it's not separate from this, much like we're not separate from everything else. The consciousness of the earth is deeply intertwined with the consciousness of the individual. You feel it. Not only the earth, but what's above us too. You know, like the gravity pull of planets, the gravity pull of stars plays all kinds of, it imprints us in all kinds of ways. In a subtle way that we potentially don't even see, but actually it drives you to behave in all kinds of different ways too. You know, like Vedic astrology is recognizing a planetary alignment that was a snapshot the first moment that you took a breath, and it made your whole system be in a very, very particular way. That's how Vedic astrology works. It looks at the imprint that happened the first time you took a breath, and that's based on planetary alignment. Now, people can choose to believe it or not believe it. Doesn't really matter. It is what it is. I've had experiences with readers that were so profound and so enlightening and very, very specific. But there's also a lot of charlatans out there too. Yeah, I think I again lost the question.
I don't know if this was a specific question, but I think we're diving into a really interesting space, because I've had a lot of, especially through the dark night of the soul, a lot of seeking out of different outside sources who could help me, perhaps ironic, and I found a lot of people who I believed in because of the emotional state I was in, and later found out I think I was being cold read there and played, and people who have just walked up to me with no alternative motive, and spoken truth to me in a way that I recognize years later as influential and as like a piece of what led me where I was. Mm-hmm. And it's, I think there's a lot of
and
truth
eventually
there.
You take over. Eventually when you have a lot of experiences with stuff like that, you become your own astrologer in some ways. Not by looking out there, but by looking here. So as above, so below, right?
Yeah.
I used to seek out all kinds of stuff. I don't anymore, and I, to be honest, don't even take, like, people want to do readings or doing like pranic. Literally, have had emails to kind of do pranic healing you from far. I'm like, please don't. Just, you know what I mean? You get to a place where it's like, okay, you're the master. You're the master. You guide your ship, and outside influences can eventually. If you have found a path that you feel like is worth if you find a thread that you can keep pulling, sometimes those other voices can be a bit distracting. So I think it's good for a while, and I think other times it's best to read yourself. And then maybe I'll go back to like listening to outside sources, but I'm in the place right now where I'm really feeling the groove that I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah, like everything, like you're saying, right? It's up and down, in and out, contrast, left and right.
Yeah.
And we got to kind of do both at different times.
Is really harnessing your discernment and knowing when to take input from who, and that sort of stuff comes from discernment. And I think discernment comes from being in touch with yourself, a deep reflection of who you are. And for me, meditation is the best tool for that. Developing that discerning eye.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time, Andy, your perspective. I can see now what Racine and Nick were trying to tell me over text, is just having that. Yeah, I'm very grateful to have you on here, and you belong on this podcast, because even over the air, you're a very strong leader. And
thanks for reaching out, and I really enjoyed it myself as well. Thank you. And,
absolutely.
Well, I would say hi to Racina, but I'm going to be get in touch with her really soon, because she's coming to a retreat that we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah, and you're welcome to come as well if you want to come.
She's been talking to me about it. We'll see if it'll make sense for me, but one way or another, I would really love to connect and come experience some of your teachings in person. So I'll be in touch one way or the other.
If anything, it's just a really amazing weekend with people in nature. And it's not like a hippie kind of like, whoa, it's just like, it's very chill. We do some yoga, we eat some good food, we go for hikes, dip in the river, we mud bathe. Just it's a nice reset. I need it.
Okay, that's wonderful. I'll talk with her a little bit more about it. I think I'll be seeing her later this week as well.
All right, my man. Thanks again.
Okay.
Keep up the good work. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Andy. It was such a pleasure to chat with you. Have a great time driving a jiu-jitsu.
Thanks. See ya.